welcome to Life Talk for September 21st, 2017. I'm your host, Mark Crutcher.
And I'm Renee Hobbs.
My co-host.
That's right.
That's right.
I am your co-host.
That's right. We've got a very interesting show today, and not to mention a very special guest.
Yes.
And I have to tell you right up front, she's one of my heroes from many, many years ago, Joan Andrews Bell. Used to be known as Joan Andrews.
Yep.
And she's going to be joining us here in a minute. We're going to be talking today about the church. This is something we've discussed here many times on Life Talk. Let's make sure people understand the perspective from which we come at this issue. We can sit here and say all we want to, that the enemies of life in America are the abortion industry, the ACLU, the Democratic Party, National Abortion Federation, NARAL, all the rest of them. And they are enemies of life. But the biggest enemy of life in America is the silence of the church. Without that, the abortion industry could not survive 30 days. If you look at the hundreds of thousands of churches there are in this country, I've said before, if just 5% of those churches were run by somebody who stood up in front of the congregation on Sunday morning and said, look, this is a Holocaust that we're involved in this country. The abortion issue is a Holocaust. And as long as I'm the pastor of this church, we're going to take a stand against it. We're going to fight against it. If 5% of them would do that.
And that's the way it should be. But
Right.
as we have said many times before, they're afraid to step on toes. They're afraid to offend.
Yeah.
They're afraid to lose the
Money.
the people in the congregation.
Yep, they're afraid to give up that collection plate. That's the biggest problem right there. It's unfortunate, but
and
it's true.
Yeah, I know. And the sad part about it is that these people need to come to repentance, and that is the pastor's job. They're not leading their flock properly, and it's very clear in the Bible that
What happens?
Exactly what happens in that situation.
Well, I had a friend who died a couple of years ago, Jerry Urbick, in Chicago. A really good friend of mine, and he and I had known each other forever. And he had started out life to be a Catholic priest. And he had gone to the seminary and decided it wasn't for him. But he told me, he said, one of the things I remember most profoundly was we had this Jesuit that was teaching one of the classes that he was in. He said the first day of the class, we all came in and sat down. He said, we're all kind of scared of this guy. He was kind of a frightening individual anyway. But they said, once the hubbub had all settled down and everybody was quiet, he said, I want to make something perfectly clear to all of you that are sitting in this classroom. He said, if you think you're here to become a Catholic priest so that you get brownie points with God, you need to think again. He said, the hottest place in hell are reserved for the men in this room. He said, because when you fail, you don't just take yourself to hell, you take other people with you. And that's what these people don't understand. That's what they do, or they don't care, or whatever the situation is.
They need to read their Bible.
But let's make sure that people understand that the church could end this thing at any time. And I think even any individual denomination could. The Catholic Church could end it. The Baptist Church could end it. If they just stood up and said, we're not going to tolerate this anymore, we're going to fight.
Yeah, and the Catholic Church has been the strongest
Absolutely, right.
church in this whole fight from the very beginning.
From the very beginning. Matter of fact, even though, and I've made this point with some of my Protestant friends, of which I'm one. I mean, neither one of we were both Protestant.
Yeah.
Neither one of us are Catholic. I was raised Southern Baptist, and anyway, and I've made this point with them. They'll criticize the Catholic Church on some things, especially on the abortion issue, because they don't do as strongly as they should. And I said, wait a minute. If it weren't for the Catholic Church, there would be no pro-life movement. The pro-life movement would not exist. The Catholics were fighting against abortion when the Protestants were still sitting on their hands.
Yeah.
And now a lot of Protestants have come into it.
Right.
But
yeah, and said that abortion was okay. They agreed with the murder of our children.
it's one of the embarrassments of my denomination, the Southern Baptist denomination. They lauded the Roe versus Wade decision. They came out and talked about what a step forward it was for women and how it was the right thing for the Supreme Court to do. And they didn't apologize for that until about 4 or 5 years ago at the Baptist General Convention. They came out and issued an official apology for having taken that position.
Right. Well, and it kind of sounds like the Methodist Church too. I mean, they're trying to step forward and step out of that.
Right.
I don't think they've quite made it just yet, but
Well, they've got a lot of resistance, and we have the lady on here that's running
Yeah.
that effort in the United Methodist Church to take
Yeah.
away their pro-abortion position. And we had her on, and they did take it away. Now, the
Right.
pro-aborts, of course, are fighting desperately to get it put back in.
oh, sure.
And
Absolutely.
you've talked to her once, just what? a
Yeah,
couple
just
weeks ago.
recently. Yeah. Yeah.
And she
They're
said
still fighting.
they're still fighting, and it's a long uphill fight. But at least somebody is out there doing it.
Yeah,
After
that's what we
making that
need.
fight. Well, anyway, in a moment we're going to have Joan Andrews Bell join us because she is Catholic, and she's trying to do something about some of the problems in the Catholic Church. And I think that these issues with the church, whether it's the Catholic Church or the Baptist Church or whatever, the church in general, I think they're starting to come to a head. I think what's happening is the clergy in this country is being forced to either put on one uniform or the other one. You can choose the pro-abortion uniform and
Right.
keep it on if you want to, or you can choose the pro-life uniform.
Right.
But you're not going to be neutral anymore.
Right. It's time to take a stand. We
Yep.
need to do something.
Stand up.
Exactly.
Anyway, we got a short message, and as soon as we come back from this, we'll have Joan Andrews Bell with us.
Hi, have you seen this pen? It's really neat, and people all over America are using them to show their support for the pro-life cause. They're available from Life Dynamics for $5, but because you're a Life Talk viewer, I'm going to make you an offer you can't resist. If you don't already have one of these pens, go to lifedynamics.com/prolifepen. Then when you check out, use the promo code at the bottom of the screen and I'll send you one of these pens as my gift. I'll even pay the postage. If you prefer, you can also order by phone at area code 940-380-8800. Now you can't beat that price, right? So order yours today and make sure all of your pro-life friends get one for themselves. Again, go to lifedynamics.com/prolifepen and use the promo code below or call 940-380-8800.
Welcome back. As I said a moment ago, and as I've told you before many times, I try not to have heroes. I don't think we ought to make heroes out of human beings, but I do. I think we all do. One of them is Patton, of course, you know that. I'm a big George Patton fan. And I sometimes wonder if he saw the American military today, what he would think with the things that are going on. I mean,
There's no telling.
you have to have transgender people in the military. Can you imagine when Patton was going across Europe, somebody had told him this?
He wouldn't want to come back.
You wouldn't want to hear the language that would have been used. Can you imagine?
No.
But anyway, one of my heroes from many years ago, and we've known each other for many years at this point, was Joan Andrews Bell. For people who may be new to the pro-life movement and have not studied it and don't know who this lady was, she was actually one of the originators of the rescue movement, Operation Rescue. And her and her sister, Susan Brindle. And she was involved in a rescue down in Florida in which she went into the clinic and cut the cord off of a suction machine to save the babies that were scheduled to be killed that day. She was convicted of that. The judge gave her 5 years in prison for that. She served 2.5 years of it, almost 2 years of it in solitary confinement
Yeah.
for cutting the head,
Right.
the head of the cord
Right.
of a suction machine in an abortion clinic.
When others do much worse than that.
The day she was sentenced, there was, I remember reading about it at the time, there were 2 people there that were sentenced the same day after having been convicted for crimes in which people died. One of them was conspiracy to commit murder, and I think the other one was involuntary manslaughter. They both got shorter sentences than Joan got.
Here she is trying to protect somebody from dying, and these people actually did the
Kill somebody. Yep.
murder themselves. Yeah.
But anyway, Joan is joining us from her home in, is it New Jersey? Is that right, Joan?
Yes. And it's a great honor to be on your program, to be with you, Mark and Renee.
Well, thank
Thank you.
We so much value you coming on. You sent me a letter here a couple of days ago about a project that you're leading. Now, you're a Catholic, And so
Yes.
you're dealing primarily with the Catholic Church, but the dynamics that exist there exist in all the churches. The guilt, the sin of omission, basically, that the church is involved in, and we're seeing this more and more. And I think Catholic bishops and cardinals and priests are being put in the same position as I talked about a moment ago. They're being forced to put on a uniform, and unfortunately, a lot of them are putting on the pro-abortion uniform, or they're at least remaining silent. And you're trying to do something about this. Tell us what you're trying to do, Joan.
Yes, and this campaign, we call it a bishop's campaign. This we're not only asking Catholics to do this. Anyone who has a heart for the babies, anyone who's pro-life can do this, because we see our bishops very much influenced by non-Catholics, by atheists and feminists and pro-aborts. They're very much influenced by them. So we specifically ask for every Catholic to go to their own bishop, first write a letter, and then ask to meet with the bishop and go with a group and ask their bishop to rescind. There's a voter's guide they have called Faithful Citizenship. Since 1976, this voter's guide, the wording of it has been very confusing and mitigating language and everything, which basically made many Catholics think that if they had a serious reason, they could vote for a pro-abortion candidate, which is the teaching of the church. That goes against the teaching of the church, because you cannot vote for someone who supports an intrinsic evil. And the Catholic Church has always taught that the taking of an innocent life is an intrinsic evil, mortally evil, and you cannot participate in any way, in a little way or a big way, in any way at all, with an intrinsic evil. So with the confusing language, it's allowing many Catholics to think they can vote for pro-abortion candidates. And as you know, in the last couple of elections, the majority of Catholics voted for the pro-abortion candidate. And this is outrageous. This is crime. This is a great Catholics
it's a
to
scandal.
go to their bishops,
Right.
meet with them, and to ask them to read the voter guide and teach the true teaching of the church, that no Catholic can be at all involved in the supporting of this heinous evil. And sometimes they'll say, well, there's two evils, like voting for Hitler or voting for Stalin. Well, the answer is easy. You don't vote for either one of them.
Right.
But in our country, in the last 40 years, there has been no evil as great. And there's been no other intrinsic evil. Even other issues that are important to Catholics, like immigration or, the nuclear armament, anything that might concern certain Catholics. We don't have all the same position on issues, as long as the war would be just and all that. But there's been no other intrinsic evil.
Absolutely.
And as I said, if there were, then you could vote you could vote for someone else, someone who doesn't support either evil, But in this country, this has been a great outrage. And many Catholics have not been well formed about their teaching of it.
Yes, that's right. But it's not just Catholics.
Well, that's why we would like people from other faiths, too, to find out who the bishop of your area is, who the Catholic bishop is, and say how shocked you are, and that you expect the Catholic Church to be truly Christian, because it is a Christian church. We claim, that we go all the way back to St. Peter, and the same teaching has
Right.
been the same moral teaching has been exactly the same.
Right.
So, and you could hopefully shame them into doing the right thing.
One thing that I've said many times on here, Joan, and that is that these churches are driven by numbers of people sitting in the pews, and the number of dollars those people drop in the collection plate, and that's what guides what the churches teach and what they advocate and so forth. And these churches understand that, like Renee was saying earlier, if they speak up, they're going to lose numbers of people, numbers of dollars. And we've got to get beyond the point And like I said, I was, Renee and I were talking about this yesterday. I was raised in Southern Baptist Church and married a Southern Baptist girl, raised a Southern Baptist girl. And I can tell you they've been obsessed with numbers forever. And it's almost like it's a ranking. So if you go to the Southern Baptist Convention and you're a pastor whose church has 2,000 members, you're a better servant of God than the pastor who has 500 members. Mm-hmm. And he's a better one than the pastor who has 100 members. Mm-hmm. And nothing could be further from the truth. And what I've always argued was that if these people stood up and started doing what they're supposed to be doing as servants of Christ, their churches would indeed get smaller, but their churches would get better. Those would be churches. They would not be just places where people come to congregate on a Sunday morning for an hour. And the other day when I was talking to you about this, Joan, you said you had talked to I don't know if it was a bishop or a cardinal you were talking to about this, and you asked them what would be the result if the Catholic bishops were to stand up and actually start speaking out about this and doing something about abortion. And you said he told you that the church would be smaller, poorer, and holier. And I thought that sums it up right there. That's that's exactly what would happen.
And I think what could happen is respond to God's grace, because we were created by God, and we have the moral code written, hardwired into us. And I believe the churches would blossom if we spoke the truth, which would be recognized in our soul, and people who were confused and pro-abortion would convert by the droves, because the human spirit responds to truth, and we have not been giving out the truth. And you look at the Catholic Church now, it is getting smaller and smaller as far as attendance, because people are losing their faith, because we're not standing up with the truth, and they don't see anything of Christ really in the church. They're not inspired, you know. But I think it will be the two ways. When we speak, it will phenomenally grow, and the church will flourish. Or if the world has gotten so devoted to Satan, then the church would be like it was Pope Benedict XVI who said, well, he saw the future of the church that'd be very small, very poor, and very holy. And that if it has to be that, then at least it'll be true to Christ.
Right.
There'll be salvation there.
Well, Joan, I feel like, so in 76, the Catholics before 76 were very united. They were very strong in their faith, and they were they were against abortion. And after 76 is when the prelates, they had taken a position that abortion would be okay if it was for a grave moral reason. And I feel like as soon as those doors opened up, then it's like a domino effect. So one thing leads to another, that leads to another, that leads to another. And that's where we are right now is we should be against abortion completely for no reason. Whatever the grave reason is.
Yeah. Well, to be clear, the church never said that it would be okay, that abortion would ever be okay, even to save the life of a mother. The church has always had, as the teaching authority, said that no abortion is allowed, that in the case of a life of the mother, you do your best to save both.
Right.
And if God takes one, God takes one. But you do your best to save both, because both have equal importance. Both are human beings, and a doctor has to save both. And you can do nothing to mitigate that, either one. But what I was talking about, this voter's guide, it says all the right things in the beginning. Yeah, abortion can never be supported. It's intrinsically evil. No one can ever directly vote for abortion. However, then this is where the however comes. If you're voting for a candidate, not because they're pro-abortion, but for other serious reasons that you support, then you basically use your own judgment, this kind of stepping out of the arena, getting off the hook, and let anyone do whatever they want to do. It's just really disgusting.
Well, I think
just letting everyone do whatever they want to do.
I think what the point that Renee's making, and I think it's correct and the right point, is not that the Catholic Church changed its official position, but that these people then started putting their own interpretation on that, their own spin onto it. And once you opened that door just a crack to allow any abortion for any reason, then the door starts opening wider and wider, and that's where we are today.
Well, yeah, I mean, that letter that you had sent us that Mark Gallagher had written up is just, it's just mind-blowing to me. And I'm assuming that it's on your website, helptheunborn.com, for people to go read that information.
Right.
Yeah, they absolutely should. I think one of the big things, one of the biggest things I think that has influenced people and making people think they can be pro or support abortion pro-abortion is that, as you talked about earlier, the silence of the churches on when anything is brought up about pro-life, the silence you get. If you're trying to do a petition in your church, you get hostility in many, many cases.
Right.
You don't get help from the pastor. You don't get help from the bishop. They don't all directly come out and say they're pro-abortion, but they try to shut you down. They won't respond. Like these St. Patrick's Day parades and stuff where they allow almost anybody in, and they won't allow sometimes a pro-life group in. I mean, it's outrage.
Well, the most recent one,
Horrendous scandal.
Yeah.
So they, by their silence or by their shunning, refuses to do anything to help the preborn children, to help stop this Holocaust. They're actually helping.
yeah, well, I think the most recent St.
Yeah.
Patrick's parade, I think they allowed,
Participating in the Holocaust.
right, they allowed, in that parade, they allowed pro-homosexual marriage groups to have a float, but not a pro-life group to have
Yeah,
a float.
that's right.
Absolutely,
I forgot about
yeah.
that.
But, you know, Joan, we're just about out of time, but I want to make a point here. I know you know who Bishop Sheen, Fulton Sheen, was.
Yes, yes.
And even though my family were Southern Baptists, we all loved Bishop Sheen. He used to have a TV show back in the 50s, and we used to watch it. But I've got a tape of his, and I think it's called The Approach of Midnight or something like that.
Yes.
And he's talking about what abortion is doing to the country. And one of the things that he said, which is, and all the things that he predicted, this tape was written, I mean, was taped many, many years ago because he's been dead many years. And everything that he predicted would happen has happened. The right to abortion has expanded now to people openly stating parents ought to have the right to kill the child up to a year or 28 months or something like that if they're not bonded with the kid. All this stuff Bishop Sheen said would come to pass, and it did. But one of the things he said, and I think we ought to take some solace in that, and I thought about this the other day when I got this letter from you and then called and talked to you a little bit. Bishop Sheen made the point that in the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church, that in times of moral crisis, the strength of the church was the laity and not the clergy, and that great change in the church has always been brought about, has always originated within the laity. And when I hear people like you in the Catholic Church doing the things this thing that you're trying to do, and some of the other things that I see, that people that are not part of the clergy, I think about him, and I think about his statement about that. I think he's really right, and I think you're one of those people, Joan.
Thank you, Mark.
And we appreciate your coming on, and we've put your website. It's called helptheunborn.com. We've put that on the screen for people to know
Thank you so much.
how to get a hold of you. And I'm hoping that this will be a groundswell of people. And like you say, they don't have to be Catholics to write to the Catholic bishop. Anybody can write to him and say, hey.
Meet with them. Just meet with them. Just first write a letter and then say, can I meet with you? Just pour out your heart. You know, maybe that we can pray for the bishop. And we'll pray for, all pastors and Christian leaders throughout the world, that they will stand up and be Christ-like and lead people.
Right.
Yes.
Well,
To
Joan,
the truth and stop this Holocaust and convert their souls.
well, I appreciate your coming on. I'll tell you, it's from the first day we met many, many years ago, and ever since then, I've thought you're one of the people that I would thank God for having allowed me to fight this battle with. And
Vice versa, Mark. Actually,
well, thank you very much,
you
Joan.
all you've done and your people.
Well, and I'm sure we'll have you back on in the future, Joan. Say hi to your sister Susan for me.
Thank you,
She
Joan.
will. She's always touched that you remember her.
Well, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Mark, and bye, Renee. God bless
Bye.
you both.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Don't you feel blessed to be associated with people like that?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can just feel and hear the outpour of love and
Sincerity.
for the unborn, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And to, when you think about, when you grow up in this culture and you think about, at least in my day, you thought about somebody that's in prison, I grew up at a time when you think, I'm not ever going to know anybody that's in prison. I don't hang out with those kind of people.
Right.
Our family's not like that, and we don't.
Yeah.
And then, half the people you meet in the pro-life movement have been in jail or been in prison.
It's kind of a trophy to be in
Right.
jail.
Almost.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to look at it.
You're doing the right thing.
You're doing the Lord's work.
You're doing the Lord's work, yeah.
And if that causes you to get put in prison, then
So be it.
that causes you to get put in prison.
Yeah. Take me away.
And but yeah, it is kind of strange. And when I first got into this, all of a sudden I'm sitting down with people, and they said, "Oh, I was in prison for 3 years, and whatever." And then Joan Andrews comes along, and she goes to prison gets sentenced for 5 years, and actually spends 2.5, and
Yeah.
2 years in solitary confinement.
That's loyalty right there.
That's commitment.
True loyalty and commitment
That's
to those
right.
babies.
Right.
Amen for that.
And God will reward her for that.
Absolutely.
He'll have a crown waiting for her for that. But
Yeah.
as he will for a lot of other people
That's right.
that have fought this battle. Anyway,
right.
you got anything else?
No, nothing else. Just any show ideas, suggestions, or something that you want to hear, let us know. We would love to hear your thoughts and ideas. So
Absolutely.
send them my way.
And please go on to Joan's website that we put up earlier and try to help her out. This lady works by herself, and she has some friends that are surrounding her, and her husband and her sister Susan, Brindle, and others. But she doesn't have a big ministry. She doesn't have a lot of money. She doesn't have a lot of the access to power that a lot of pro-lifers often have. And so she needs your help. She needs the help of the rank and file people in the pro-life movement. So if you feel led to do that, go to her website, read the material there. And like she said, even if you're not Catholic, you can still call the Catholic bishop and ask him to sit down and talk with you. And, it might be, I can't predict this, but it might be that in some cases and with some bishops, a non-Catholic might have more influence with them than a Catholic would. So you never know. Just do the best you can and cast your bread upon the water. That's all you can do. You do the best you can, and that's all you can do.
Yeah.
Is that it?
That's it. Thank you, guys.
Until next time, remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how the killing stops. We'll see you next Tuesday.